It definitely, man, it was just such a weird experience watching this film because it's almost transported me back to high school. And I started to even feel those same insecurities I used to have. I started to feel, some relate to some of the things that kids are going through. Um, and it made me also think, man, how much of it is what they actually believe and how much of it is just influenced by the energy that's around them and just trying to get a laugh, if you will, or right. Like, I guess it's just hard to discern. Do they actually believe these things?
Um, that is a great question, and I think there's two answers really, which is one, we never made a film about this age group is pretty interesting for exactly those reasons, right? We all
Yeah.
went through it at some point. You're kind of in a shape-shifting part of your life. I mean, we always keep growing, but there's this particular period of 17 to 19 when you're really about to leave your house, and who you are as a political person is also a question we had in our minds. Like, when do you develop your politics and why and where? I mean, it's not
Yeah.
always directly related to your. It's not something you're gifted as like a gene. So
Yeah.
I think that this age group also very interesting because you definitely heard a lot of kids who were parroting surely what they heard from at home or what they'd seen on whatever media diet they were on. And what was so important to us is to find four kids who we really felt had a kind of formidable understanding, not only of how government works, and all of them, the four people we follow, have very intense passion, the sort of like knowledge of history too. But they really kind of thought for themselves. I mean, I think one of the first things Ben, as much as a 17-year-old does, these guys all really did have a kind of strength to their beliefs that was pretty interesting to me, at the same time that they had this kind of openness to change. And so
Yeah.
that kind of strange balance is what we needed in our main characters. And that's what we found for in all different ways with the four of them. But for sure, I think high school is an interesting time for everybody and a hard time for everybody. And also kind of maybe one of the reasons we really wanted to be there. They're sort of vulnerable in a way that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because I think if you get them alone, you're going to have a different conversation than when they're in a group, and they're you mentioned that their openness to change things. You're right. And I'll be honest, like when I start watching it, Robert, the longer haired kid that's in the movie, at the beginning, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to be the villain of this in a sense, not to use such a aggressive term, but, just in those sort of, theatrical terms. Right. So, because he comes across as just leaning into the energy, leaning into what's happening, wanting to put a mirror up to what he sees as the surface topics, right? What they think he will be accepted. And him thinking about it too much and him coming up with this strategy backfires on him. And he reflects upon it and he sees that. And he you know what, I wrote down this quote that he said because I just, boy, this really stuck to me. And it's amazing what you can learn from somebody no matter what their age. But he said, you don't get elected on minority issues in a democracy. I think he said that was him. Yeah, it was him. And I thought that honesty was so wonderful that he would admit that, because you're also at an age where you do say these things. You still are open about these thoughts and not keeping them in a sense. And yeah, I thought that was just very interesting that he would say that, because in a way he's right, and that's a weird thing, right? Because then you're stuck not pushing for other things you might want to push for. I just found that particularly interesting.
I think all of these guys surprised us. They also surprised themselves. I think Robert, we don't necessarily think when we meet him that he's capable of self-reflection or growth.
Yeah.
And he's one of the biggest surprises in the movie, that confession, which we didn't know he was carrying this secret, that he was not being truthful about his politics. I think he articulates a struggle too that we see reflected in national politics. Do these people really believe what they say? Are they just pandering to the electorate to get elected? And to watch each of these four boys individually confront these moral questions in the form of politics is, I think, what made the journey for us so revelatory. And because we do care about all of them. We don't agree with all of their politics. We're pretty progressive. We identify deeply with Stephen, and I think he's kind of the heart and soul of the film.
100%.
We were bound so tightly to him in this journey. But we really like them all. Ben, too, who's kind of the villain and is a Reagan supporter.
Yeah, he was great he was great in the film. Just as a character in a film.
I think that, you mentioned the teenage aspect of this film. And I think that we were excited about making a coming of age movie. That's a coming of age political film in Texas in this moment. And we had been told that Boys State was a kind of crucible for transformation. And we thought that's bullshit. It can't possibly, it's just a summer camp. But actually the intensity of it, the commitment that it requires, the risk taking, I think you see kind of forces real change, not for all of them, but it really is a coming of age film.
Yeah. Do you think, having the cameras following them around, do you think that had an impact on them? Do you think they would have had the same experience at Boys State?
It's such a good question. It's kind of one of the great questions of
I guess it's hard to know, right?
We do, and it's hard to know because obviously there's no scenario where our cameras weren't there.
Sure.
And like the kids stay, and they don't know the reality of that event without cameras. But we're not fly size. We're not fly on the wall. We're like very big, and there's 8 of us. There was a lot of camera units. There was 1,100 people, as you said, in the kind of a Lord of the Flies maelstrom scenario, and we were part of that chaos on some level. And we've been doing this a long time, so we can sort of choreograph ourselves sort of in and out of spaces without, messing things up too much. But Stephen has a good answer for this. He's like, even with a camera on me, I had a very hard time getting my signatures that I needed to be on the ballot, And so I would say my answer is always like, yeah, our camera pointing at him probably gave him an extra little oomph of confidence, because this is a kid who didn't, kind of get that kind of attention maybe before us. But the fact is our camera didn't create his ability to give a speech the way he and only he can give a speech. I mean, it's really an extraordinary gift that he has that we were fortunately there to capture, that, he'll continue to use hopefully in his life. But that's what you really hope for when you do this kind of work, is that you kind of luck out on some level that these people have, that you're there for those moments.
Yeah, that they shine through in some way. No, totally get it. Yeah, no, Stephen had me, crying a couple times for sure. Just without a doubt, I just felt it was just emotional. It was emotional for me to see him go through that. And, I don't want to spoil anything for people that haven't seen it. But yes, I'm also curious how you choose those particular, people to run this. And did you have other people that you shot that didn't make it in the film?
We had a couple of folks we met in advance who kind of just didn't work out. Their ambitions sputtered. And, we were really interested in people who were going to run for governor and who were competitive. And we went all in on Stephen and Robert and Ben, and we got lucky that they did phenomenally well. We also have some instincts that are honed from 2 decades of documentary work. And, it's not a formula. It's not science. It's kind of trusting your heart. And you get to meet people and talk to them. And, it was pretty apparent to us that Stephen, even if he didn't immediately present as a natural politician, because he was kind of quiet. He just had a confidence and I don't know, a kind of X factor that you thought just maybe this kid could do something special. Of course, because he's progressive, we thought he's going into this sea of predominantly white conservative Texans. They're not going to take to him. I think that was one of the great surprises, both for him and for Renee, is that these kids who come from very different backgrounds than most of these other kids, these young men of color, of progressive politics, actually find their own voice and also find a way to summon the better angels of this electorate and to build those bridges that I think we're all looking for today in American life. And that's watching those bridges get built. And it's not easy. And sometimes those bridges collapse, is a really, I think, is a fascinating process to watch, because I think we need to be reminded that it's possible, and we need to see people who can do it, and we need to see it done well. And sometimes we need to see it fail too. And I think that's what we got to see.